Good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses Live with Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. It's Wednesday the 14th of April. It's a bright sunny day here in London, lovely cloudless sky, and it's show number 130. So what have we got for you today? Well, in the news, Colin Appleyard has sold the bike arm of their motorcycle sales business. Spanish bikers have voted against compulsory airbags, but not as unanimously as you might have expected. Cumbria police are engaging with motorcyclists at Hartside and Devils Bridge this weekend. Kent police aim to educate anyone on two wheels. The Donington Hall Estate has been bought by MotorSport Vision to create a leisure resort. And I'll be telling you about an EagleRider bike share scheme that's been set up in the USA. And we'll finish off with a better biking tip about blind spots and drivers. Don't forget, if you have anything you want to ask, any comments, I'm happy to answer them. I'll try and get back to you at the end of the show at the latest, but I do look in as I am able to during the show itself. If you've got anything you'd like me to cover, do ask away, and feedback, of course, is always welcome. Right, okay, so before we go any further, Cheryl and Nick have both looked in, so good to see you guys. Right, stay with me for the next 25-30 minutes or so. Now, don't forget, before I go any further, I am back on the road with my training courses. I have some handy locations around London. I train from the M25, M1 area around St Albans. I've got another starting point up near Epping, which is basically bottom of the M11 area. And that takes us on some fantastic roads, well, some of my favourite riding. Another start point in Buckinghamshire, just off the M25 and the A40. And again, we get out on some really nice roads almost straight away there. It surprises people how quickly we're out of the town and built up area generally. And I've got another start centre at Egham, which again gets us onto some fairly reasonable roads, which are quite nice to ride. Not quite as good as Essex, but still pretty challenging. And finally, I've got a start point at the South Circular Road where it joins the A20. And again, within a few minutes, we are out onto some nice roads in Kent. So if you have any desire to get out there on your bike and do some training, give me a call if you're anywhere near the London area. You can get to all those places from inside London or outside London without too much delay. Right, okay, so on with the show. Colin Appleyard, they're one of those bike dealers that have been around forever. You know, when I first started watching motorcycle racing and buying MCN, Appleyards were always advertising bike sales up in Yorkshire, and when I went off to sort of places like Cadwell Park in Links to watch racing, there were always Colin Appleyard sponsored riders out there on the track. And in fact, it's their 50th anniversary this year. They opened as a motorcycle dealership in Keighley in 1971, and that makes it one of the longest established motorcycle dealers in the north of England. The company, as I said, has been a big supporter of motorcycle racing over the years, not least, of course, supporting Robin Appleyard, who was a successful professional motorcycle racer for many years. He won several national 125 championships, and he was also a regular points scorer in GPs. And now he's retired from racing. He's currently the firm's managing director, and he also looks after the Colin Appleyard-backed British Superbike team, Appleyard Macadam Racing. And this team has won 11 British championships over the years, and it will continue with its commitments this year. It's signed the twin team of Bradley Pirrie and Rhys Irwin, who are both young up-and-coming riders. But the bad news is they have just sold off the motorcycle branch of their business, and their intention is to shift their focus entirely onto the sale of new and used cars and to focus on car parts and servicing from their 5 showrooms. The motorcycle arm has been sold to MotoGB, which is now the UK's largest independent importer and distributor of two-wheeled vehicles, and they'll continue operating from the Wellington Road Keighley premises as a motorcycle dealership, and they'll be retaining the existing staff. Colin Appleyard actually began selling Suzuki cars in 1979 when Japanese cars would have been something of a novelty on the road, and they remain a family-run business, although they have now grown so that there are branches across West Yorkshire and Greater Manchester. Robin Appleyard said, our foundations were built in motorcycles, but over time it's actually become a relatively small percentage of the business as a whole. So we have made the decision to focus on our well-respected car group. It's not something that was decided lightly, but it's the right decision for the whole group and the staff. Right, so over in Spain, what's been going on over there? Well, you may remember a couple of weeks back I mentioned a survey that was being conducted by the Spanish motorcyclist organisation, the Asociación Mutua Motera. I apologise to anybody who speaks Spanish for completely mangling that. In order to determine whether or not motorcyclists were in agreement with the possible mandatory use of airbags for all motorcycles. Now, this proposal has come from the Spanish Directorate General for Traffic, and is part of a package of measures which are all aimed at reducing the frequency of motorcycle crashes in the first place, but the severity of injuries in the second place. And to that end, they also propose that the wearing of gloves becomes mandatory. Although the measures to the discussion stage and any legislation would actually be several years away, the AMM conducted this poll to get a clear idea of Spanish riders' views. Juan Manuel Reyes, the president of the AMM, said, "The problem we have is that when a European country legislates something in relation to motorcyclists, others follow. This is what happened with gloves in France. When they became mandatory in our neighbouring country, the Spanish government immediately wanted to imitate the measure. That's why I believe that any measure that is approved in a European country must be monitored by all European motorcyclists, because sooner or later it is possible it will be extended to others." Now, they got 2,547 motorcyclists to participate in the survey, and the results are in. And they are possibly something of a surprise to you. Let me just get the right one back up on screen. Oh, come on. It's playing hard to get. There it is. The biggest segment of that pie chart there is the number of motorcyclists who do not agree with the mandatory use of airbags. Now, 65% it is, roughly speaking, and while that's a sizable majority, it's absolutely not what I expected. I really expected the majority to be much larger. Now, 5% didn't express a view, but that leaves actually a whopping 29%, which is a pretty big minority. I think you'd have to agree. It's almost 1 in 3 who do think they should be compulsory. And that really surprises me, I have to say. Personally, if there is a benefit from the technology, and I think we are still to ask that question and to look for clear-cut evidence that they do actually reduce injuries in crashes, I would imagine that the benefit is likely to be in fairly low speed crashes and falls. So if you ask yourself, where are you most likely to fall off or crash at low speed? And the answer, of course, is in town. And what struck me was that of the 3 groups who thought that airbags should be mandatory, by far and away the tiniest were the respondents who thought they should only be mandatory in the city. The biggest group who thought they should be mandatory, in fact, was the opposite. Now, reviewing the results, the European Motorcyclists Federation, FEMA, they also called the results surprising. And to find out more, the AMM actually went to social media to look for comments from riders to find out why they've made the decision they had. And the obvious conclusion is that most of the people who actually agree that they should be made compulsory do so because they believe that an airbag, vest or jacket could provide additional safety. However, there are arguments against the mandatory use, and the first one is the high price of these things. And somewhat surprisingly, another objection was that the safety garments continue to have VAT imposed on them. You'll be aware, I expect, that that's the case for safety clothing in the UK. Helmets are VAT free, but even if you buy a CE approved jacket with CE approved armour, you still pay VAT on it. And the others objections, people believe that if the government is going to act, it should act on improving infrastructure, something that I suspect many people would also believe here. And one thing that popped up was also the fact that the Spanish government haven't apparently fulfilled other promises to motorcyclists, which include legalising intercoms, which are actually illegal in Spain. So, the way forward. Well, the AMM have a meeting scheduled with the Spanish Director General for Traffic later this month. Both the AMM and FEMA, of course, point out they encourage the use of protective equipment on a voluntary basis, but both organisations are against mandatory use. The FEMA statement concludes that if personal protective equipment is mandatory, like gloves in France, then it should be officially tested and certified according to European regulations. And I'm no doubt Paul Varnsbury, who, as you probably know, is well versed in protective clothing, will have something to say on that issue. I'll be looking, I hope, to follow that up in another show. Right, okay, so Martin has looked in. Good morning, Martin. Don't forget to set a reminder to catch Elevenses. It's at 11 o'clock on Tuesdays and Sundays. So I hope to see you on the next show on Sunday. So what's else been going on in the world? Well, here in the UK, it's the first few days of a 2-week nationwide road safety campaign. It's aimed at all road users, although not surprisingly, as it's spring, there's a particular focus on two-wheeler groups. And this is now a broad category, which includes motorcyclists and cyclists, but also scooter riders. So for the first week of the two-wheel campaign, which is led by the National Police Chiefs Council, the aim is to be educational and to raise awareness, and this is what's begun on Monday this week. But you can look forward to some enforcement being carried out in the second week. So what's going on? Well, up in Cumbria, police officers are taking part in this campaign, and this coming weekend, that's Saturday 17th and Sunday the 18th, officers from the mobile support group will be in the Hartside and Devils Bridge areas, engaging with drivers, motorcyclists and cyclists. Now, you probably know, if you live anywhere up there, that Hartside and Devils Bridge are very popular motorcycling stops. And if the weather's good, with the lockdown eased, I dare say both areas will be heaving. So it would be a good idea probably to be on your best behaviour. Temporary Inspector Steve Vickers from the Cumbria Police Mobile Support Group said, motorcyclists and pedal cyclists are some of our most vulnerable road users. It's important that all road users take steps to reduce the danger to themselves and others. Those on two wheels must consider their own safety and making sure they are wearing the right equipment. All road users should take care and recognise those that are more vulnerable on our roads. It's important we educate ourselves to reduce the tragic consequences that can happen. And then there was some advice to drivers about giving space to cyclists and motorcyclists, actually, when overtaking and following. The advice to motorcyclists is the usual stuff. Ensure your bike is roadworthy. Check your lights, tyres, reflectors and brakes. Reflectors, well, yeah, okay, it's a legal requirement, but quite frankly, has anybody ever seen a motorcycle actually on the road thanks to the reflector? Well, probably not. Make sure you're wearing bright clothing and protective clothing. Be vigilant. Look out for drivers who might not have seen you, and take care when overtaking on country roads. Right, okay, fair enough. Down in Kent, what's going on? Well, officers from the Roads Policing Unit and their Special Constabulary will be speaking to cyclists and motorcyclists about dangers of not having having the correct skills, knowledge and protective equipment to ride safely. So pretty much the same message, of course, not surprising as this is a national initiative. But interestingly, the Kent press release also mentioned that officers will be looking to improve and educate those who ride e-scooters and to talk about the law surrounding those vehicles. Now, e-scooters are classed as personal light electric vehicles, which means they're treated as motor vehicles and subject to the same legal requirements, which of course means that virtually everybody you see riding one of these things is breaking the law. And so Chief Inspector Elena Hall, who's head of Kent's road policing unit, says that enforcing the law is business as usual, but we welcome opportunities like this to help further promote road safety messages. And their officers will be looking for anyone on two wheels who's riding in a careless or dangerous manner over the next 2 weeks. It's their priority to keep riders and other road users safe, and officers will be looking to raise awareness about amongst motorists about how to improve road safety. So, yes, all right. What can I say? Well, just basically take it easy out there. You know, you are under observation at all times, obviously, but it's particularly keen at the moment. All right. Okay, good stuff. Now, you may remember that Donington Hall was part of the portfolio of property owned by Norton Group when they went into receivership earlier this year. And MotorSport Vision, the company that controls the neighbouring Donington Park circuit, has revealed that they have plans to turn Donington Hall, which you can see there in the photo, rather nice pile, into a rather exclusive 40-bedroomed hotel for riders and drivers using the adjacent track. Now, MSV actually dominate the sort of tracks scene in the UK now. They also run brands Alton, Snetterton and Cadwell, as well as Bedford Autodrome. They've bought the freehold to the entire 28-acre Donington Hall estate. This North Leicestershire estate was actually home to Norton Bikes, as you may recall, before the bike builder went bust. And the Grade 2 listed hall was actually the home of Norton's previous owner, Stuart Garner, and his family. Now, MSV say that the hotel should be ready for the 2023 race season, and their idea is that it will be a unique and extraordinary facility because he says that specialist car and bike owners and will be able to fly into East Midlands Airport and then be driven the short distance to the hotel. Now, along with the hotel, MSV is also creating a stabling compound for supercars, vintage cars and racing cars and bikes, as well as mechanics workshops to look after them. So basically what you'll do is you'll fly to the hotel, have a pleasant evening in the environs, no doubt, and then next morning your car or bike, which has been stored and maintained on site, will be delivered to the front door of the hotel, ready to be driven straight to the track. Or presumably, if it's not road legal, I don't know if there are roads involved, whether it'll be started up at the track for you. But anyway, basically, it'll be there waiting for you after breakfast. Oh, yes, you can drive it up the original carriage drive straight to the circuit. MSV have also got the ownership of Hastings House, which was where the Norton production line, as it was situated. That's to become the storage facility for motorcycles and classic and modern cars, and that'll be called Donington Hall Motor House. That's set to open this autumn. And finally, also within this 28-acre package, MSV have also taken charge of the Lansdowne Workshops building, and that's are going to be available to be let by motor engineering businesses who can then help with the upkeep of the machine used on track and stored in the motor house itself. So big projects there for MSV at Donington Park, definitely turning motor sport into something of a high-end activity. Now, something else which is rather expensive, generally speaking, is renting motorcycles. I don't know if you've ever looked at the prices, but presumably because of the crash rate, they are much, much more expensive to rent than a sort of car. So when I was over in California in 2018 visiting my brother, we took a day's riding up in the Santa Monica Mountains, which are just to the northwest of Los Angeles. It's a fabulous area to visit, even if it is a bit prone to wildfires. On our route around the area, we passed the set of MASH, the famous 1960s, 70s TV series, which it nestles in a bowl in the hills, and you can see it from an adjacent road, which apparently do resemble North Korea. And the trouble is that some of the set had actually burned down the previous autumn, and of course, as it's abandoned, it's not going to be rebuilt. So that's a bit of history gone. Anyway, point being that I needed a bike to go riding, so my brother had arranged for me the rental of an R3 from EagleRider. Now, it's a great little bike, actually, twisty roads, but the sort of thing that we were on, they're fairly narrow, short straights and very tight corners. And in fact, a lightweight bike like that is actually fun to ride. Anything much bigger would have been wasted. But basically, having signed up to take the bike out of their showroom, I'm now on the mailing list, so I do get updates every now and again from them. And this is the latest from them. It's a scheme to take away a rental bike not owned by EagleRider, but actually owned by a private owner. The blurb that came with it says, rent your motorcycle and earn an average of $775 per month with EagleShare, the world's most trusted power sport and motorcycle rental marketplace. Now, I always wonder how it is that they actually manage to come up with a $775 earning per month when the scheme's brand new. Clearly these sort of figures are guesswork. But anyway, how does it work? Well, basically, there's a list of 4 steps. You put your bike on the EagleShare site. After you sign up, you'll put it bit of information on the bike, and you set your own rental rates and availability. There's no upfront cost, no obligation. So then riders basically in stage 2 will be looking for a motorcycle to ride in a particular area, and if they see your bike and like the look of it, then they book it, and they, EagleShare that is to say, send the rentee the home address, the country's residence, driving license, other important information basically to you. And then if you like the look of them, you can confirm the rental or you can decline it. It's up to you. Obviously, if you agree to rent it out, you meet the person who wants it at a convenient location. You then basically talk them around the bike, just show them what's what, and give them that quick safety check, and you hand them the keys, and then off they go on their journey. And then to final stage, of course, is that the bike is then returned to you on the scheduled date. You simply close the rental using a smartphone app and then basically get paid for it. So, okay, it sounds easy, doesn't it? But it's there's a bunch of questions on an FAQ page which answers things like, how do I set the rental price? Will I receive earnings for a cancelled booking? How do I know if a booking is cancelled? How do I report a no-show? Why do I need to take trip photos? How do I cancel a confirmed booking? And what if a renter's flight is delayed or cancelled? But 2 questions are actually fairly noticeable. What do I do if my motorcycle gets crashed? And what do I do if the renter never comes back to me with my bike? What if I get sued? Would be another one that I would add to that list as well, because you know what the Americans are famed for. That's suing anybody who gets in their way. The scheme does come with insurance provided by certain underwriters at Lloyd's of London, so that must be all right then. And basically that covers $1 million in third-party liability insurance, though there's a caveat that says it covers all owners that qualify to be covered. So does that mean that some owners don't qualify? And again, there's a physical damage protection scheme, although again it's for vehicles that qualify to be insured, without any explanation of what that means. And damage coverage, I noticed, is only $25,000 or the total replacement value. Now, I can see a few problems with that. There will be some bikes exceeding that limit quite comfortably, I would have thought. And the total replacement value is one of these things that always involves an assessment and usually an argument about what the bike was actually worth. The insurer's assessor of looking at your bike lying at the bottom of a canyon may not match your own of what you thought it was worth as the rider riding it disappeared down the road on it. Valuing extras is always a particular issue. Anyway, it's an interesting idea, and if you're headed stateside and looking for a bike for a few days, it might be worth looking into to find out what the problems are like. Okay, so what have we got here? Jim Martin has said good afternoon, Kevin. Jim has also looked in and said good morning. Martin has also said, I've looked into renting a bike when I visit the UK. It's ridiculously expensive, so I've never done it. I suppose it's insurance that drives the price. In Vietnam, I rent a nearly new scooter for £50 a month inclusive. Yes, okay, I can honestly say that, yes, they are very expensive to rent motorcycles. Right, okay, so on to the final topic of the day, a little bit of better biking tips and tricks to finish off. Have a quick look at this photo and tell me what you can see is wrong with it. Well, the answers should be fairly obvious if you think about it. A blind spot is defined as an area that you cannot see into. So how exactly is a driver going to be checking into that blind spot and spotting a motorcyclist? It's it's basically it's a false statement, and it's one that unfortunately has gained a lot of currency. You see signs like that all over the world. And the big problem, I think, with the campaigns like this is that they actually give riders a false sense of security. We've had this sort of Think Bike campaigns going around since the original one, which was back in the mid-1970s. You may recall the original Think Once, Think Twice, Think Bike TV advert. I often run that one on my Science of Being Seen presentation, just to remind people how old the Think Bike campaigns actually are. It's just been reprised once more using CGI this time, which I think is even less realistic than the original filmed ones, frankly. But the thing is, judging by the proportion of looked but failed to see collisions that still happen at junctions, the problems are exactly the same. These Think Bike campaigns really don't seem to have any long-term significant effect on junction collisions. And my main worry is that they imply to the rider that the problem is actually the driver, and the rider thinks that if only the driver looks hard, that's the solution to this problem. So as soon as one of these campaigns is posted, what tends to happen is there will be a string of confirmatory posts tacked onto the bottom of it by riders who will say, I was involved in a collision with a driver who didn't look. And all it does is it cements our viewpoint as riders that the problem is the driver. Now, if you're aware of the Science of Being Seen, you may well know that I call these right-of-way violation collisions two-to-tangle crashes. And that's because if one road user, nearly always the driver, sets up the circumstances in which the crash could occur, the only way it can occur is if the other road user, which is normally, of course, the motorcyclist, rides into the crash to make it complete. Now, these crashes rarely come out of nowhere. I've talked about surprise horizons before, which are the blind areas created behind vision blockers, something like a house with a driveway behind it. But we can see them. And of course, a lot of the collisions happen with vehicles that the rider could see quite clearly in the run up to the crash. So the idea that they are a sort of a bolt from the blue for the rider is completely false. Now, what I would like to see instead is actually alternating slogans. Let's remind drivers by all means that they need to be aware of motorcycles. Let's remind them to take an extra look, to look harder, to look longer, to look more carefully, to look in there, around the blind spot areas as best they can to spot motorcycles. Let's do that by all means. But let's also remind riders to think about their problems. So what we need is think bike, but also biker think. And in this case, what I would like to see is a second banner up on those overhead signs saying, motorcyclists, check you're not in a blind spot. Now, for what it's worth, I was only caught out by a blindside side swipe myself last year. I was on the way back. It was a lovely midsummer day. You remember what last summer was like? Absolutely gorgeous. It was warm. It was wall-to-wall sunshine. It was early afternoon, and I was coming back from a training course out in the Essex area. So I was on the North Circular Road, headed back to Northwest London, and I was just about to arrive at the exit ramp, which is the same one as the M1 comes off the North Circular at. Now, it's a slightly complicated junction, and as we were coming up to it, maybe half a mile short, an SUV overtook me quite slowly in the middle lane. I was in the left-hand lane, and it got a few meters in front, and then it kind of sat there, and I just kept back from it. But as we came up towards the junction, it slowed down. Now, I have to admit, my main focus was actually behind me on my near side. I was keeping an eye on what was coming down the slip road to join the bit of road I wanted to come off at, because you kind of have to pass through it. There aren't two separate slip roads. There's just one wider bit of road, and you have to kind of negotiate to space. And just as we were about to arrive at the exit ramp, I realized that the SUV driver had actually rolled off the throttle, and I was just about to pass him on the inside. And at that very moment, of course, he realized that he wanted the left exit that I was just aiming for, which was now about 50 meters ahead, and started to move left into my lane. So into the space basically that I was occupying. Now, I just hit the horn gently. That moved him back. No big deal, no big drama. I saw it coming. But if I hadn't have noticed that, the danger is I would have been simply, pushed into the barrier at the side of the road there. Now, why didn't he know I was there? Because obviously overtaken me just a few seconds earlier. Well, my guess is it's this problem to do with the number of pieces of visual information that the brain can hold in memory. And this, again, is something that I talk about on Science of Being Seen. It's a fairly new phenomenon that's been recognized and measured. And my guess is that what he was focused on was looking for the road signs, trying to find his way, possibly on the GPS, listening to instructions as well. And I suspect that what happened is, having passed me, I simply slipped out of his memory. He ran out of brain storage capacity to deal with my bike. And obviously enough, as I was in his blind spot, it didn't matter whether he checked his mirrors or not. He simply couldn't have seen me. So it's pretty fruitless at this point saying he should have looked harder for me, because I'm being mashed into the barrier. It's me that needs to do something about it. So fortunately, I was alert, and I did manage to get him to pull back. And that's basically the message I try to get over to all riders wherever they ride, to accept that drivers will get it wrong, and to be ready to take some personal responsibility for staying out of trouble. So to go back to those police campaigns that we launched off the show with almost, you remember that they are talking about drivers looking harder for bikes. Well, yeah, okay, fine, by all means, tell drivers to do that. But remember, if you're a biker, look harder for drivers too. They are very often easier to see waiting at junctions or approaching a junction about to turn right across our path than we are for them to see. And we often have plenty of time to spot the problem coming. Think about that too. We're only looking one way in front of us. The driver is looking at least 2 ways, possibly 3 ways if it's a crossroads, and maybe checking things like the pavement for pedestrians, or keeping an eye on the cyclist who's trying to squeeze past at the same time. So it's not nearly that so surprising that drivers do miss motorcycles. The frustrating thing is trying to get motorcyclists to look for the problems is so difficult. So, okay, that's it for today. Don't forget, if you are interested in a SOBS presentation for your group or your club, I'm more than happy to deliver anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, in fact, via Zoom, of course. So don't forget, there are the 60-second safety videos up on YouTube that you can watch to improve your riding skills. I'll get a new one up tomorrow with a bit of luck. Anything else to say? That's pretty much it, really. I've just finished putting up the 2017 posts on my coffee page from Facebook, so there's another 100 gone up. That's 400 plus articles over there on the Facebook archive. So that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you found the show useful and interesting. And if you're heading out on the road this weekend, do stay safe and do keep your eyes open and be careful out there. So, all right, thanks for that. See you again soon. Bye for now.